Many of you may know Chance Wilkins, or Cyraxx, a predator that lurks in the attic somewhere at this very moment in Akron, Ohio. One thing we'll find about Akron is that there always has been strange or supernatural happenings in the town, happenings that just may have predicted our goblin of present day. First, I want to establish though, one thing many people will find themselves identifying Chance as is a goblin. Specifically that term goblin. This would be a completely unanimous title given to the creature. It would be very easy to portray the fact that no matter where you're from, your ethnicity, the country you're from, everyone identifies him as a goblin. Especially put very clearly on display when libs of TikTok would make that post about him. It would blow up and you'd see when scrolling through thousands and thousands of comments or the content made about it, people have never heard of or seen Chance before, they would call him a goblin. He has all of the characteristics the general population would attribute to that of a goblin. Now, after establishing that fact that Chance is undeniably recognized by the masses as a goblin, you might be surprised to find out that Chance certainly isn't the first goblin of Akron, Ohio specifically. You see, in my regularly scheduled Goodnight Grubbin stream, where we typically review goblin content, a viewer would enlighten me with this article looking back on the goblin sighting of 1894. Now, flabbergasted over the fact that Chance wasn't the only goblin of Ohio, let alone Akron, I had to look into this after the stream. And what I came to find out is the similarities Chance shares with this goblin don't lie only in name. It goes deeper than that. The story goes as such. It was getting close to dusk in 1894 as children played in Union Park, enjoying their last moments of daylight before going home for the evening. The triangular park, bounded by Hill, Forge, and College streets, it was a wooded sanctuary nestled among large, opulent homes and four-story Akron High School with its 160-foot clock tower. Neighborhood kids would have fun climbing on an excavation site that workers had left behind that afternoon while building an ornamental fountain. When completed, the stone landmark would be 35 feet in diameter with a central jet of water surrounded by 6 smaller jets. At night, an arc light would shine through multicolored glass, projecting a beautiful effect on the water. But that was still months away. The park didn't have lights and it was getting darker by the minute. A shriek interrupted the playful chatter of children. Howard Crum, 12, of Lincoln Street, pointed at something in the shadows and screamed again. Startled, the youngsters ran away. What had the boy seen? It was hard to believe. He described it as being 1.5 feet high of dark red color with hair covering its entire body and large green eyes that sparkle like diamonds. And there we have it. The first of all the similarities beginning. Not only did the Goblin of 1894 appear to also be roughly 1.5 feet tall just like Chance, but given all these scabs and the infections littered around his entire body, including his mouth, you could probably conclude that a good portion of Cyraxx's body is also dark red, and aside from the top of his dome, he would appear to have hair everywhere as well. The Goblin of 1894 is about 1.5 feet tall, dark red, and covered in hair, and the Goblin of 2026 is about 1.5 feet tall, covered in hair, and dark red. Is the story of Chance Wilkins a story foretold by the Goblin sighting of 1894? Have the powers that be concluded that roughly every 100 years or so, a goblin would manifest in Akron, Ohio? Had Chance's transformation into said goblin came later in life due to being born so far from Ohio? These 132-year-old accounts only create so many more questions. The cherry on top of it all at this point in the article, even as we're just beginning, is the astounding number of parallels we can continue to draw between the two. This goblin creature was alleged to have came from the earth, awoken or freed during the excavation of the fountain in the middle of this park. And then what many people seem to really forget when it comes to Chance is that he too also came from the earth, much like that creature. We see him all the time up in his crusty attic. We forget he had the basement all to himself for the longest time. A basement, of course, being located within the same earth that first goblin came from. But of course, the appearance of the two goblins would not be the only similarities to be shared with this 100-year-old goblin and the goblin of today, no. The article goes on to say, if it had only been one child, the story would have been quickly dismissed, but the other kids said they saw the furry creature too. Was it a goblin? The following evening, a large group of curious kids gathered in Union Park, and other children hoped to see it for themselves. At about 8:30 o'clock, a sharp cry directed their gaze toward the fountain, and there stood up top one of the stones was the unknown. The Beacon Journal reported it as going through a weird sort of dance, slowly swinging from one side to the other. Wow, now that's puzzling, isn't it? Another similarity we find between these two goblins, over a century apart, is their love for dancing. Both of these scary looking short little creatures have been found doing weird rhythmic movements you could make the argument of being dance. It's just incredibly bewildering to see these reports of a mysterious creature right in Akron sharing so very much with our current goblin. Is Akron does it have a crazy curse that brings about the creation or mutation of a goblin every 100 years or so? And that would be something that just seems to further solidify itself to be the case as these coincidences just continue to pile up. While Chance would be born September 20th, 1990, just 4 years short of the 100-year anniversary of the very first goblin sighting of Ohio, he also wasn't even in Akron at this point. Connie and Rupel, his parents, would have been in Alaska when Chance was born, and that would be where the family would reside for 4 years. Because you see, in 1994, the infamous bike path incident would occur, where Chance's father would be found out to have done some terrible things to a poor girl on a bike path. After self-reporting in a sad attempt at clearing his own name, his arrest would be the catalyst in sending Chance to be raised by Sally, his grandmother. And just where would the two go in 1994? Akron, Ohio. On the 100th year since the last goblin was spotted in Akron, Cyraxx would arrive. This would very clearly make sense when you consider just how normal he would seem when he was much younger. I mean, look at the little guy. Not quite normal, but then again, the goblin transformation was probably underway already in this point, if he was already in Akron. So now, in goblin lore, this canonically explains precisely why Cyraxx didn't quite look like a goblin until he started hitting his high school years. You know, started balding and his teeth began to form into that goblin maw we see now. Because the Akron, Ohio's goblin curse wasn't able to fully personify itself within Chance until after his birth. Let us continue down this article and draw a few more parallels, though, to solidify this case even more that Cyraxx is in fact the reincarnation of Akron's goblin of 1894. We'll continue on in this specific encounter where said goblin was mid-dance. This was kept up for several minutes when it suddenly jumped to the ground and started for the sightseers. They scattered in all directions, running one way and another, but all making a beeline for home as fast as their legs could carry them. In the ensuing chaos, Sarah English of Ford Street reported that the goblin or ghost or whatever it was had used its odd metal weapon to strike her on the shoulder with a blow of considerable violence. Another girl, Blanche Stair, also of Ford Street, was delirious with fright. More than 150 people gathered in Union Park that next night. As the time neared 8:30 p.m., the crowd massed around the dark fountain. If the creature reared its ugly head, the mob was ready for it. He failed, however, to materialize, despite all the crowd could do. The Beacon Journal reported clubs and stones were distributed freely among the people, and had he made an appearance, the reception would have been a hot one. The Goblin of Union Park was never reported again. We have a couple of things here in just what little is left of the story. So this goblin, much like ours of the present, loves to charge at people with weapons. You can obviously tell now in hindsight, looking back on the incident Chance had with Aware of Myself, when he charged him like a lunatic with that bat. Not only was Cyraxx absolutely filled with bloodlust and rage, but it was hard-coded in his goblin DNA to pick up the nearest weapon he can when he feels that way and charge as fast as he can at the nearest person. A person who in this case was a man recording rather than children. Now, so far in this video I've loosely touched on, but have yet to really point it out, and this would be the absolute largest thing related between these two goblins, separated through time, living very similar goblin lives. Of course, knowing Cyraxx, what would be the two's very clear and obvious connection is the connection of kids they both seem to have. In 1894, the only times the creature would ever appear to the public would be the times it would appear before the eyes of children of varying ages. But always children. It would even perform its dance for them. Then we have Chance Wilkins. Through the many stings, even Kate's most recent, very short-winded sting, would remind us time and time again just how much he loves kids. We would even later find out just how close this fountain's proximity to Akron High School would be, where after the closing of a path or roadway would become essentially part of the school's front yard before its inevitable demolition. So this creature spawned from deep within Earth's crust in order to appear before and then attempt to prey on kids, all in Akron, Ohio, of course. It would bestow upon them its dance first, perhaps in an attempt at luring them in, much like the Goblin of Now, and then it would strike, pouncing on them, attempting to prey on these kids, but soon afterwards, its heinous attempts on these younger fellas would bring about the attention of a larger crowd. A crowd of 150 plus people in order to try and stone and beat the creature, again, very much like the mass amounts of trolls summoned to keep the goblin from being happy due to his own preying on the young. We see parallel after parallel, line after line, correlations made time and time again. I really don't think we could make this point any clearer here. It was Akron's destiny to receive a goblin again after 100 years. That poor town in Ohio was destined to see the goblin reincarnate in chance. Although very much like the Goblin of 1895, the Goblin of today has far overstayed his welcome, and the general public stand ready with their clubs and stones, hoping the Goblin fails to materialize and disappears for another 100 years. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this slightly different video today I had prepared for you, and don't forget to subscribe and like to see more shit like this. I found it absolutely hilarious that Chance wasn't the first goblin to have been spotted in that specific town in Ohio. And reading through it, it was even funnier being able to relate the two in any way at all. But anyways, Chance Wilkins is the reincarnation of the Goblin of 1894. Big thank you to anyone who made it this far to the end of the video today. Later, Grubbas.